Hey, 42 here. On the 19th of April 2012, stem cell biologist Thilo Kunaf delivered a lecture about Parkinson's disease at a conference in Edinburgh. When the talk was over, a woman at the back of the room stood up and raised her hand. Her name was Joy Milne, and she had a question. An unusual question. In fact, this question was so strange that at first Professor Kunaf didn't even really understand it. Joy, a nurse by profession, wanted to know if any research was being done to understand why people with Parkinson's smell different. A loss of sense of smell is a common symptom of Parkinson's disease, and initially Kunaf assumed Joy was referring to that. But no, she wanted to know why people with Parkinson's pong. Joy's husband, Les, had Parkinson's, and she believed the disease had changed his natural aroma. According to Joy, who claimed to have a particularly sensitive nose, her husband had always had a distinctive manly scent. But after developing Parkinson's disease, that smell had been replaced by something far less pleasant. Joy's question was so far out of left field that Kunaf didn't really know what to do with it, but he answered as best he could. So far as he knew, people with Parkinson's didn't smell any better or worse than anyone else. That's pretty much how they left it. But Joy's strange theory stayed with Kunaf in the weeks and months after the conference. She hadn't come across like some kind of crazy alternative medicine hippie. She had the matter-of-fact air of a trained medical professional, which is exactly what she was. And what really stuck with Kunaf was just how convinced Joy had been that Parkinson's had changed the way her husband smelled. And, well, what if she was right? A few months later, Kunaf asked a colleague for a second opinion. That colleague was analytical chemist Perdita Barran, and while she was understandably skeptical about the idea of someone smelling Parkinson's disease, she didn't dismiss the idea completely. She knew that dogs had been trained to identify certain kinds of cancer through scent alone. And if a dog can smell cancer, why couldn't a human smell Parkinson's? Actually, there was a fairly obvious answer to that question. The average dog has a sense of smell between 100,000 and 1 million times more sensitive than a standard issue Homo sapiens. The most sensitive nose in the canine kingdom belongs to the bloodhound, a breed with a sense of smell 100 million times more sensitive than our own. Canine and human olfactory capabilities are universes apart, but both Thilo Kunaf and Perdita Barran were scientists. They knew better than to dismiss a hypothesis purely based on intuition and preconceived ideas. If they truly wanted to find out if Joy Milne could smell Parkinson's disease, well, they were going to have to test her. I recently took a 10-day trip to Norway from the UK, and I thought I was covered for roaming with my UK phone carrier, but when I returned home, my carrier had stung me with a £40 additional bill. That's why the next time I travel, I'll be using Arran. Trusted by more than 15 million travelers worldwide, Arran is the world's first eSIM store that solves the pain of high roaming bills by giving you access to eSIMs. And if you use my code 42, you'll get free US$ off your first eSIM. Arran was created to save you time and money. No more roaming fees, no more lines in the airport to purchase a local SIM card, no more hassle looking for a strong Wi-Fi connection. Also, when using eSIM, you get to keep your home phone number. Arran has you covered in more than 200 countries and regions, so you can stay connected from the moment you land, no matter your destination. To get started, simply download the Arran app, choose an eSIM plan and purchase it, depending on your destination of travel. For example, if you're traveling to Malaysia, choose the Malaysia eSIM. Install the eSIM within a few minutes using the in-app instructions. And when you land in your destination, turn on your eSIM to activate it and instantly connect to the internet. Install Arran today so you can stay connected wherever you travel and use my code 42 to get free US$ off your first eSIM. Scan the QR code on screen now or click the link in the description. A big thanks to Arran for sponsoring this video. Between them, Kunaf and Barran were able to track down Joy via the charity Parkinson's UK, and they invited her to Edinburgh University to take part in a very unusual experiment. Along with Joy, there were 12 participants, 6 people who had Parkinson's and a control group of 6 people who didn't. Each of them was instructed to wear a clean white t-shirt for a 24-hour period. They weren't allowed to use deodorant or perfumes of any kind to ensure their clothes smelt of them and nothing else. The t-shirts were then sent to a lab at the university where they were cut in half, placed in bags, and given to Joy. Her task was simple. All she had to do was give each half t-shirt a good old-fashioned sniff test and then deliver her verdict. Did the person who had worn that t-shirt have Parkinson's disease or not? It was a double-blind experiment, meaning neither Joy nor the researchers had any idea whether or not her selections were correct until the whole thing was over. And later that evening, the entire team sat down to look at the results for the first time. To everyone's utter amazement, Joy had correctly identified all 6 Parkinson's sufferers just by sniffing their t-shirts. She'd even managed to perfectly match every t-shirt with its other half. It was a stunning result, except for one small problem. Joy had made a mistake, incorrectly identifying a member of the control group as a Parkinson's sufferer. A single false positive amongst 12 was an incredible result, but it did leave at least some room for doubt. With only 12 participants taking part in the study, it represented a small sample size. Perhaps Joy had just gotten lucky. Given her accuracy of over 90%, it seemed unlikely, but it couldn't be ruled out entirely. Despite the blip, Kunaf and Baran were impressed enough to want to continue their research into Joy's uncanny sense of smell. But in order to do that, they first had to answer an important question. What was Joy actually smelling? Parkinson's disease is caused by a loss of dopamine-producing neurons in a part of the brain called the substantia nigra. But clearly Joy wasn't somehow smelling an absence of neurons, so what was she smelling? At the start of the experiment, everyone had assumed that if Parkinson's disease did indeed have a distinctive smell, it would originate in the sufferer's sweat. If that was the case, the scent should have been most potent in the armpit area of the t-shirts, but Joy insisted it was strongest around the neckline and across the upper back, and that pointed the research team to another possible source of the scent. Not sweat, but sebum. Now, I've always been under the impression that sebum is a famous Canadian bodybuilder and 6-time winner of Mr. Olympia, but it turns out it's actually an oily substance produced by our sebaceous glands that protects and lubricates our skin. So, Perdita Baran put together a follow-up study to hunt for potential anomalies in the sebum of Parkinson's sufferers. It was the next logical step to pinpoint exactly where the smell was coming from, but unfortunately securing funding proved to be practically impossible. Everyone who'd been involved in the original experiment was convinced Joy's unusual talent was worth exploring. But to the rest of the scientific community, things were a little less clear. The idea of sinking a load of cash into a project based solely on the supposedly superhuman sense of smell of a random pensioner just didn't sound like serious science. Add to that the fact that Joy's superlative sniffer had made a clear error the only time it was ever actually tested, and, well, nobody was interested. Baran was ultimately forced to shelve the project indefinitely, and that would have probably been the end of it if it were not for a chance meeting 8 months later that changed everything. Professor Kunaf was back in Edinburgh for another Parkinson's conference when he bumped into someone familiar. At first, he couldn't quite place the man, but once they got talking, he realised who it was. A bloke called Bill, one of the participants in Joy's infamous T-shirt sniff fest. To begin with, Kunaf couldn't understand why Bill was there. He'd been part of the experiment's control group. He didn't have Parkinson's. So, what was he doing at a Parkinson's conference? You guessed it, it's plot twist time! Thanks to what can only be described as a monumental coincidence, just months after the experiment, Bill had been given a shock diagnosis. He did have Parkinson's disease. Professor Kunaf could hardly believe his ears. As soon as he was able to, he checked his records from the original experiment, but he already knew what he would find. Bill was the so-called false positive, Joy's only mistake. Turns out, he did have Parkinson's all along. The implications of this chance revelation were monumental. Not only did it mean Joy had aced the experiment after all, but her nose was apparently so absurdly sensitive it had diagnosed someone with Parkinson's before the disease was detectable by modern medicine. It was a genuinely astonishing discovery. But looking back, it probably shouldn't have come as much of a surprise. Joy had first noticed a change in her husband Les's natural aroma in 1982 when he was just 31 years old. But back then, she didn't know what was causing it. To begin with, she just figured he wasn't washing enough. Les wasn't officially diagnosed with Parkinson's until 12 years later. But even then, Joy still didn't connect the smell with the disease. Why would she? Over the years living with Parkinson's, Les's symptoms became progressively more severe, and in 2009, the couple joined the kind of Parkinson's support group to seek comfort in the solidarity of other sufferers. The very first meeting of that support group changed Joy's life. Because the moment she stepped into that room, it hit her. The very same smell she'd first detected on her husband's skin 27 years earlier. Every single person in the room smelled exactly the same. Joy diagnosed Bill's Parkinson's disease several months before the doctors did, but she had unknowingly diagnosed her husband's 12 years before modern medicine. The fact Joy can detect Parkinson's through scent alone is remarkable, but the fact she can do so incredibly early is a potential game changer. One of the biggest obstacles in treating Parkinson's disease is that it is almost always detected years or even decades after it first appears. The reason for that is simple. The kinds of symptoms people are likely to notice, slight tremors, muscle stiffness, a minor change in gait, they only show up when the disease is already relatively advanced. By that point, 60 to 80% of dopamine-producing neurons in the substantia nigra are already gone. In other words, by the time most people realize they have Parkinson's, a huge amount of unrecoverable damage has already been done. Joy's ability to detect the disease so early had the potential to revolutionize not just the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, but also the treatment. By this point, Joy's incredible story was already starting to attract the attention of the press. Add to that what was now looking like a near miraculous performance in that first test, and Perdita Barran suddenly found funding for a new study much easier to come by. She collected sebum samples from thousands of Parkinson's sufferers, then used a technique called gas chromatography mass spectrometry to separate and measure the various different compounds those samples contained. Through that process, she identified 3 distinct compounds that appear in significantly elevated levels in the sebum of Parkinson's sufferers: icosane, hippuric acid, and octadecanol. Joy was able to confirm that each of those compounds matched the scent profile she associated with Parkinson's disease. Based on those findings, Barran and her team have developed a simple swab test that, in early lab tests, is able to diagnose Parkinson's disease with 97% accuracy. Further tests are required both to confirm those results and to explore how early diagnoses can be made using this technique. But early signs are promising, and there are already plans to make the swab test available in hospitals around the world. There are even hopes that it might one day be used to screen entire populations for Parkinson's disease to ensure it is diagnosed as early as possible. It is now beyond question that Joy can diagnose Parkinson's disease through scent alone. But that remarkable fact leads to an obvious question. What about other diseases? Can she smell those too? Actually, yes. Yes, she can. As of today, Joy has demonstrated an ability to detect Alzheimer's disease, tuberculosis, cancer, and diabetes, all through scent alone. If you've been to the cinema in the last decade or so, you'll probably have noticed that one genre dominates: superheroes. Marvel films alone made up a frankly ridiculous 30% of the US box office in 2021. But as I hope this video demonstrates, you don't need to go to the cinema to see superheroes. At least one is already living amongst us. She can't fly or turn herself invisible, but as far as I'm concerned, Joy Milne's remarkable ability to smell deadly diseases and potentially help us fight them absolutely qualifies as a genuine superpower. But as any good comic book fan knows, with great power comes great responsibility, and that is certainly true for Joy. These days, she is understandably quite a high-profile figure in the world of Parkinson's, and through her advocacy, she travels the world meeting thousands of people along the way. Naturally, some of the people she meets suffer from the horrible disease Joy's nose is so uniquely able to identify. Some of them likely already know they're ill, but some of them do not, and that gives Joy one hell of a moral dilemma. Would you want to know you have Alzheimer's disease, which has no known cure, years before its effects become apparent? Would you want that knowledge hanging over you? For most people, that question probably doesn't have a straightforward answer, and Joy has ultimately decided to take a non-disclosure policy. If she smells the telltale scent of Parkinson's or Alzheimer's disease on the skin of someone she meets, she keeps that knowledge to herself. She's decided she doesn't have the right to tell people news they might not want to hear. I can only assume it must be incredibly hard for her to meet someone and immediately know that great pain and suffering lies in wait for them in the future. As of today, nobody knows why Joy's nose can do what it does. She is indisputably hyperosmic. That's the name given to someone with an unusually sensitive sense of smell. But even amongst hyperosmics, she seems to be practically unique. Joy's husband Les passed away in 2015 at the age of 65. His life with Parkinson's disease was not an easy one, but through that great personal tragedy, Joy discovered a gift that may eventually change the way Parkinson's disease is diagnosed and treated forever. Thanks for watching. Just a quick word to say that I couldn't make these videos without the support of my Patreon members. Consider joining the exclusive 42 Discord community by supporting me on Patreon. It's a great place to discuss my videos with like-minded individuals and myself. The link's in the description, but if you don't want to, or you can't join my Patreon, then please don't worry. A simple like or comment to say thanks would also put a huge smile on my face. Thank you.